You don't necessarily have to read them if you do want to be naughty and skip them. It's either fantasy smut, where romance is the all and end all of the book, or it's not in there at all. So there you go. Doesn't really get anything done. It's very pompous, very up its own kind of arse. Now Bayaz is a twat. What's up guys, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be showing you my all-time favourite trilogies. So I'm going to be going into my top 5 favourite completed trilogies. That means so ones that have all come out and that I've all read. This was actually surprisingly difficult to do because I didn't realise that a lot of the books that I hold as my all-time favourite books aren't part of trilogies. They're either part of a much larger series or a duology. So I was kind of struggling to come up with the top 5. So I'm in the market to look at some other trilogies out there because I'd like to expand or at least grow this list. I am in the middle of quite a few trilogies, so I do need to maybe just finish those ones, and then this list will be a little bit more unexpected because I feel like I've got a lot of my favourite authors on here, so it's not going to be anything brand new. But I think it is a pretty good foundation mark for what I think are good trilogies, what I've enjoyed in the past, and hopefully going forward we will grow and expand as a reader. So the first one I have is the Daevabad Trilogy by Shannon, or S.A. Chakraborty. She has recently changed her name to Shannon, although it's always a name. But officially, on her books, it is now Shannon Chakraborty. I read this series a while ago now. It was the first fantasy series trilogy that I remember reading and really loving. So we have the City of Brass, the Kingdom of Copper, and the Empire of Gold. And we begin in 18th century Cairo, where our main character is a little bit of a swindler. Nari is a con woman swindling the kind of upper, I think it's the Ottoman soldiers out of their money, but she accidentally summons one of the most renowned jinn of kind of legend to her by accident when she's on one of her swindling con missions, and he then takes her to the legendary city of Daevabad, which is full of jinn. However, it's currently run by a rather ruthless and tyrannical leader who is causing the whole city to be fractured even more than it already is. There are 6 jinn tribes that live in the city, plus the Shafit, which are the jinn/humans that live there. They're greatly looked down upon. None of the factions kind of get on together. We also follow Prince Alizad, or Ali, who is the idealistic son of the king who wants to revamp his father's regime, change it for the better, and revolutionize his father's way of ruling. Basically, the whole city is a pot about to boil over. There is so much tension between all the factions, and we're just there to sit back and watch it go, kind of boom. This series has some of my favourite characters of all time in it, some of my favourite relationships that grow from friendships to a little bit more than friendships, to enemies to friends to enemies. It has it all going on. I absolutely love it. I love the political stance in this. It was the first kind of heavily politics heavy book that I read. And getting into that in this world where the magic is based on such a rich mythology was incredible, and the way that Chakraborty weaves this mythology into this world is honestly so good. I absolutely loved it. It makes such a huge difference to the kind of your fantasy typical medieval set world, which I also love, but it is such a great time to see something different and have different cultures and religions introduced into these fantasy stories and then done really, really well. It was such a great book. It's such a good system. The magic is incredible. It's woven in there so that it feels real and it just works. It is so good. I love this series. I was kind of worried that I read some short stories recently from the series that just came out, and I was worried I wouldn't love them as much as I remember loving this series because I read it so long ago, but I really did really enjoy that short story collection, which is rare for me. I'm not a short story person, but I loved it, so I do want to go back and reread this series now. It's given me the push to do that. So, would highly recommend this. It does border the line between YA fiction and adult fantasy. I'd say if you're an adult fantasy reader, you're absolutely perfectly fine reading this, but if you're a YA looking to branch over, definitely go with this. It's one of the best ones that borders the lines out there. Some of them I think are done quite poorly when they're trying to do both, but this one I think does it spectacularly. Next we have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This I picked up once before a few years ago and I did not like, but I gave it another go in preparation for her new release Babel coming out and her doing her book tour, because I was going to see her, so I wanted to read this series and I'm so glad I did. It's the most recent read on this list and I absolutely powered through this trilogy in about 2 months, which I haven't done in a very long time. It's so good. Incredibly dark, but so good. It's an incredible historical fantasy heavily inspired by 20th century China history. So if you know anything about that, you know it was incredibly brutal and dark. And R.F. Kuang does not hold anything back in putting this in her books. So we follow our main character Rin as she is trying to get out of a really dire situation. She's a war orphan, and the family that she's been placed with want to sell her to a much older man so that they can sell more opium for their business, their illegal business. She, to get out of that, works really hard to get into the renowned military school up in the north. When she goes there, she realizes that it's not just about getting there. Her struggle's not over. She then has to fight to stay there, and also against the kind of racism and judgment from her being a much darker skinned, poor person in a city where that's looked down upon. So she has to kind of deal with all that against her, with her classmates going against her, not liking that she's actually quite good at what she's doing and succeeding in her classes. And she also discovers shamanism and kind of falls into with a kind of insane teacher that no one really likes or respects, but she discovers that he knows shamanism, and they work together to build her abilities in this magic world that is unknown to most of the people in the book. Then halfway through, the shit really hits the fan and the whole country goes to war. So we have a great shift in plot, and all our characters kind of thrown into the middle of a really, really brutal war. And it is crazy to see what these characters go through and their mental development and deterioration, as well as they are faced with these hard, difficult times that are really, really brutal, like so dark. They are the most horrific things I think I've ever read in a book, so I will put a big warning on that, like just be warned, it is really dark. But I think R.F. Kuang is really good at looking at how mentally messed up war makes people. It's not Suns and Roses. It doesn't really make heroes most of the time. These people come out of this war having made the horrible decisions which were, in theory, for the greater good. You know, they're for the good of these people that they're trying to fight for, but at the same time, you're killing all these other people that are equally doing the same thing on the other way around. So I think the big question in the Poppy War is whether or not war is worth it, whether or not you can be a hero in war, or really you're all just the bad guys. And can you come out of war still being a good person? I don't think R.F. Kuang thinks that you can, so make of that as you wish, but it is phenomenal. It also has some of the best character relationships I've ever read, mainly friendships. In here, we've got friends that are so diehard that they will literally die for each other, but they do not hold back on telling the other person when they are wrong, having massive arguments and really straining the relationship. But at the end, when it comes down to like literal life and death, they will be there for that person. So I really love that side of it as well. It was not just like super plot heavy. You also had the character elements in it that I love in fantasy books. So the next trilogy we have is another old one that I read quite a few years ago now, and that is the Nevernight Chronicles by Mr. J. Kristoff, one of my all-time favourite authors, mainly because his most recent book, The Empire of the Vampire, but I do think the trilogy is still good and worth mentioning on this list. So we follow Mia, who is the daughter of an executed traitor. After her father's failed rebellion, Mia barely escaped with her life. Her mother was killed, her father was executed, and her younger brother was also murdered. So she's currently living in the bones of this city, which is the literal bones of a god, and she's just trying to survive, but also she has a very cool ability to manipulate shadows. One of the best things about this book is her companion, who is a cat made of shadows, and he's called, well, I say Mr. Kinley because that's how I read it, but I think it's Mr. Kindly. But in my head, he'll always be Mr. Kinley. Kind of early on in the book, she stumbles across a secret assassins guild, the Red Church, and she is initiated and uses them to kind of build her skills and abilities to enact her own personal revenge against the people that killed her family. It's kind of stereotypical in the cliche we have of coming of age stories where they are assassins trying to get their revenge. Sarah J. Maas kind of put that as a cliche now, I would say. There was a big boom of that a few years ago, and this is kind of part of that, but I don't think that that makes it bad. I think cliches are absolutely fine so long as they're done well, and I did thoroughly enjoy this series. I think J. Kristoff's writing really puts a spin on it. He's very sardonic, is that the right word? Sarcastic, you know, he's very crude. There's a lot of swearing in this, which makes it kind of adult fantasy, but I would say it's at the very top of probably another border of like YA adult fantasy. So it's for those adults, young adults looking for adult fiction, but having not maybe read a lot of it. So some people do have an issue as well with the writing style because it uses a lot of footnotes, and some people don't like this, but I personally, from what I can remember, loved them. Like, they weren't put in at a time when the action was really high. They were done well, as in they didn't interrupt the flow necessarily, and they did give you a lot of interesting information about the world world that you can use later on in the book, but equally, I think you don't necessarily have to read them if you do want to be naughty and skip them. So I didn't mind them. I quite enjoyed them. I liked it. I liked that as a stylistic choice in his writing. The romance also in this trilogy gets so good. The first book, it's okay. Then it gets really good. So I would highly recommend it if you're looking for like a kind of, it's not the main storyline, but it's kind of just like a good side storyline in it, which is hard. Like, I don't read a lot of fantasy that has a good side storyline of romance in it because, I don't know, it's either fantasy smut where romance is the all and end all of the book, or it's not in there at all. So there you go. Coming now to the second last book on this list, and we have the First Law Trilogy, of course, by Joe Abercrombie. If you know me, this had to be on this list. I absolutely love Joe Abercrombie, one of my all-time favourite authors. He's incredible. He is the greatest. I always struggle though to describe this series because there is so much going on and so much I want to tell you about it that I can't do it in a succinct manner, but I'm going to give it a go today. So we're in a world that's very much like medieval England, where magic used to be a huge part of it, but it's pretty much gone by this point. There is very little left of it. We are focused mainly on the country or the governmental group of the Union, where most of the conflicts appear. This world is always at war or on the verge of war, or war is about to break out. And most of these wars are completely pointless and futile. They get you nowhere. They just get people dead, a lot of people dead, and not a lot comes about of it. The Union government is pretty dysfunctional. It's pretty crap, actually. It gets manipulated and pushed around a lot. Doesn't really get anything done. It's very pompous, very up its own kind of arse. They think they're the greatest and they should rule everyone else, basically, but they're just pretty dumb. The main character we follow from the Union is Giselle. He is the son of a very rich nobleman from the Union, and he's very pompous, very arrogant, does as little as he possibly can, looks at himself in the mirror for 3 straight pages, and is very vain. I love him. I think he's hilarious. He is useless, absolutely useless, and completely naive about his uselessness because he thinks he's just amazing and he just is incredible without having to do anything. So he is completely unaware of the world around him. Then we have Logan Ninefingers, who is from the north, the ruthless, brutal, lawless north. He himself is a named man, which means he's basically killed a lot of people and is famous for that and known for that and praised for that. He, however, has come down south because he's kind of been outrun from the north by this man called Bethard, who is taking over the north and trying to unionize it. Maybe not unionize it because we've got the Union, but like bring it all together as one north instead of loads of little factions or clans. And there's also these creatures called the Shankar who have flat heads. Google a picture because I could not figure out what they look like. On his way down, he meets this magician called Bayaz. Now, Bayaz is a twat. He is such an annoying character. Not annoying as in like annoying, but like he is so frustrating. He's a horrible person. Don't like him. He manipulates everyone. But he's come to get together this group to go and find this stone, I believe. I can't exactly remember exactly what it was. So he brings like Giselle, Logan, and Farah. Another one of my main characters. I really enjoyed Farah. Warning, there's not a lot of female characters in this series, I have to say, so just kind of bite the bullet and get on with that. He does get slightly better as he goes on with the series of the world with female characters, but he's just not quite there yet. But Farah is a great female character in this and one of the only ones in this book. So he gets them together to go on this journey to find this stone, and that's their kind of story arc. Finally, we also follow Glocta, who is a celebrated hero turned cripple torturer. So he was captured in the war previous to this book and tortured. Now he does the same thing for the Union, getting confessions out of their criminals. Whether or not they are true, he will tear out teeth, he will break limbs, and he will get you to sign that piece of paper saying you did whatever it is that they want you to say. He kind of stumbles across a few things that don't add up and ends up going on kind of an investigatory route, trying to uncover what is going on in this world, because it's not a very straightforward what's going on at all. I would say this is mainly a character-driven book. If you're here for the plot, you're probably going to get a little bit lost along the way, not washed, because it is a little bit wishy-washy what the plot actually is, I'm not going to lie, and you don't get a lot of gratification at it, so the pacing for the plot is not all there. You have to be there for the characters. If you're not there for the characters, you're not really going to enjoy it, I don't think. The characters, though, are incredible. Logan Ninefingers is my favourite. I love him. He's incredible. He's just trying to do the nicest thing out there, but he just fails a lot. Then you've got Giselle, who is, as I said, this pompous idiot, but he's so kind of like frustratingly funny that I just love him. And then you've got Glocta, who is the most pessimistic, depressed character out there, who is equally incredibly funny and a lot of people's favourite characters. Like all my friends that have read this, he is their favourite character. So you're probably going to love them too. Like the Poppy War, this is a grimdark fantasy, so it has a lot of kind of the same running themes through it about war and the futility of war and whether or not you can come out of it the other side still being a good person, whether or not you went in it with good intentions or bad intentions. It has a lot of discussion on kind of the harsh realities of life, when bad things happen to good people, good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to bad people, and good things sometimes, very rarely, happen to good people, and all those kind of things. So it's not the most positive and uplifting books that you will read, but it is exceptional. Expect to come out of this feeling slightly depressed, but you also have the dark humour in there to kind of lift those sad moments and depressing moments, and it just is a great read. I loved it. I know it doesn't sound like a good time, but it is a great time. Finally, we have the trilogy from my all-time favourite Brandon Sanderson, and that is the Mistborn Trilogy. This is such a good trilogy. It's not my favourite series of his, but it is obviously, his only trilogy, but it is the best trilogy. It's so good. It's a great time. Mistborn is set on a world where it has been overrun by the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord has won, and it is covered in this never-ending ashfall, so it's very dark and gloomy, and there are mists about. The magic system manifests in the ability to consume and then burn metal. So use that metal to then give yourself an enhanced ability. So this is called allomancy in this world, and you have things like consuming tin and then burning it will give you enhanced eyesight. Pewter will give you enhanced physical attributes, so make you very strong basically. You've also got less physical abilities but more force abilities. So steel allows you to push off metal, so if you're standing on a drain pipe, for example, and you push off it, you will go flying upwards. There's also the ability to pull on things, etc. Not everyone has this ability though. You have the normal folk like us who would just eat the metal and it would do nothing. You have mistings who can consume one type of that metal and burn it and use it. And then you have mistborns who can consume all the different types of metals and have all the abilities. So we follow our main character, Vin, who at the start of the book has been abandoned by her brother. Her mother was mentally ill for reasons we don't know yet, and so she's kind of been abandoned to survive by herself. She's got into this with this group of thieves, and then as they're about to go on a mission, she is discovered by this man called Kelsier, who is the leader of a rebellion brewing in the city. So he is a Mistborn, and he believes Vin also to be a Mistborn, so he takes her under his wing and trains her in all things Mistborn. So we get to see really what the magic system is through that kind of dynamic. And then we also get into the main heist plot of this book. So it is a heist where Kelsier gets together all these different people with all these different abilities to break into the Dark Lord's big scary house, into a room that no one's allowed into, so they believe has the key to whatever it is that they need to destroy him and to remove him as the oppressive ruler that he is. So that is the main plot for the first book. It gets a lot more kind of complicated and everything changes at the end of the first book, so that isn't really at all what the whole trilogy is about, but it is phenomenal. It is just brilliant, and I don't know how to describe it. We do have a really good romance in this as well. Yeah, it's good. Some people disagree with it, but I think it grows as it goes on. Initially I wasn't too sure, but as it got on further throughout the trilogy, I think it was phenomenal and really well done, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And Kelsier is he's such a good character. He's just great. I'm not going to say anything else, but he's brilliant. And the group dynamic we have with all these mistings coming together for this heist is honestly, they all work so well together. They make jokes, they laugh together, and the whole thing is just incredible. I need to reread this series so badly. It's the only Sanderson book, main book, that I haven't reread, or series that I haven't reread. I've reread most of the Words of Radiance now. I'm literally about to finish it, and then I'm going to reread Oathbringer. I reread Elantris and Warbreaker, so this is the only one that I don't think I've got round to rereading yet. It's on my list to go back to because I do think it is really brilliant, and I think I'll enjoy it actually more the second time around, which is rare, but I have a feeling for some reason that I will. So there we have the top 5 fantasy trilogies of all time. If you've got any to recommend to me, please do, because I want to read more. I clearly haven't read enough. I feel like in this trilogy stance, is that a word? That's not the right word. I clearly haven't read enough fantasy trilogies out there, and I would like to know more. You now clearly know my taste in fantasy trilogies, so if you do have any recommendations, please do list them below. If you would like to see more videos, I post every single Sunday, so do like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video next Sunday.